Brick by brick, this mansion was built to keep the living out and the dead in. Within its walls, secrets breathe and shadows speak. Welcome to Haunted Mansion Stories. Every mansion has secrets. This one whispers them in the dark. Listen to the secrets only if you dare. Asheville was never quiet. Even in the dead of night, music seeped through its bones. A lone fiddle wailing from a basement club, a gospel chorus spilling from a cracked church window, a drunk strumming 3 chords on a street corner. The city breathed in melody and exhaled rhythm, its heartbeat steady as a snare drum. But there were songs the city didn't play anymore. Songs too dangerous to remember. Songs that vanished with the voices who first sang them. The old musicians whispered about them in bars that no longer existed, in late-night conversations fueled by bourbon and regret. They called them the devil's setlist, tunes that granted fame, glory, immortality even, but demanded something far greater in return. Some said the setlist wasn't real, just a story told to scare the ambitious. Others swore it had burned through generations, swallowing singers whole, leaving nothing but echoes behind. Elias Crow never believed in curses. Not until the night Marla Finch gave him the book. The rain fell like it had something to prove. It hammered the rooftops, churned the gutters, and turned the neon lights into rivers of red and green that bled into the black pavement. Elias Crow pulled his jacket tighter and cursed the storm under his breath. His guitar case weighed heavy against his leg, not just with wood and steel, but with the years of failure it carried. Once, people had said his name in hushed tones, Elias Crow, the songwriter behind the stars. He'd been the phantom hand behind ballads that climbed charts and won awards, but his face had never been printed on a single poster. Fame had skimmed right past him, landing on the singers who stole his words. Now, his name wasn't whispered at all. The only light came from the sign across the street, Finch Curios and Collectibles. The flicker of its failing neon buzzed like a wasp. Elias had passed it 100 times but never stepped inside. Something about it unsettled him. The shop always looked too old, too still, like it belonged to another decade entirely. But the rain left him no choice. The bell above the door gave a weak jangle as he entered, and the smell hit him first: dust, wood polish, and something faintly metallic, like blood dried long ago. The store stretched back farther than it should have, its shelves crammed with forgotten instruments. Trumpets with dented bells, guitars with missing strings, banjos whose skin was torn to shreds. Old photographs lined the walls, faded black and white portraits of musicians, their eyes wide and unblinking. Behind the counter stood Marla Finch. Her silver hair was tied in a long braid, and her face seemed carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, lips pressed thin, eyes as pale as smoke. Elias had seen her around Asheville for years. Everyone had. Nobody knew how old she was, or how long her shop had been there. She never changed. "You're wet," she said softly, though her tone carried no warmth. Elias shrugged, shifting his guitar case. "Storm'll do that." Her eyes lingered on the case like she could see through it. "Still carrying that thing around, are you?" He stiffened. "You know me. Everyone knows you, Elias Crow. They just don't remember they do." Her words sank like stones in his chest. Before he could ask what she meant, she bent down and retrieved something from beneath the counter. It was a book. Leather-bound, its edges singed as though touched by fire, the cover etched with faint patterns he couldn't decipher. She slid it across the counter, the way a dealer might slide cards across a table. "I don't need a book," Elias muttered. Marla didn't smile. "It isn't for sale. It's for you." He stared at it, then at her. Why? Her pale eyes fixed on him. Because you're hollow. And hollows need filling. Something in her voice made the hairs on his neck rise. He opened his mouth to refuse, but no sound came. His hand moved on its own, resting on the cracked leather. It was warm. Too warm. When he looked up again, Marla was no longer watching him. She had turned away, already lost in the shadows of her shop. The book was his, whether he wanted it or not. Elias stumbled back into the rain, the case at his side heavier than it had ever been. Elias didn't light the lamp when he came in. He dropped his guitar case against the wall and stood dripping in the dark, the storm outside clawing at his windows like something that wanted in. The book sat on the table where he'd left it, though he didn't remember placing it there. It looked older in the dim light. The leather seemed to breathe, the grooves shifting like veins beneath skin. The burn marks along the edges pulsed faintly red, as if the pages still remembered fire. Elias poured himself a drink. One became two. By the third, he was ready to touch it again. The cover resisted at first, then parted with a sigh that sounded disturbingly human. Inside, the pages weren't filled with words, not exactly. Symbols crawled across the parchment like notes, but not notes any human hand had written. The staves bent at impossible angles. Some measures ended in stains darker than ink. He ran his hand across one line of music and froze. The paper hummed beneath his fingers. A low vibration, like the bottom string of a bass, rumbling through his bones. Elias pulled his hand back, but the sound didn't stop. He shut the book. Silence. His apartment seemed smaller now, as if the walls leaned closer. He turned on the lamp, half expecting to see someone standing there. But he was alone. That night, he dreamed. He was on stage. Not the broken dive bars he'd haunted for years, but a grand hall, gilded balconies, chandeliers, velvet curtains. The kind of stage reserved for legends. Every seat was filled. Yet the audience was shrouded in shadow, their faces blurred, their hands pale and thin as bone. They clapped in perfect unison, a sound too measured, too exact. And they chanted one word. Elias. He woke gasping, his sheets twisted, the lamp still burning. The book was open on the table though he swore he'd shut it. The page before him glowed faintly. It was waiting. Elias woke with a headache like someone had driven nails through his temples. The storm had passed, leaving the morning washed out and grey, the city below his window sluggish and waterlogged. But the book still sat on the table. Open. Waiting. He had shut it. He knew he had. Yet the page before him wasn't the one he'd left off on, it had turned itself. The music etched there shimmered faintly in the dim light. The notes twisted in ways no melody should. Some climbed upward in jagged spirals, others sank into black pools of ink so thick they looked wet. There was no title, but scrawled along the margin was a single phrase in crimson. Play me, and they will hear you. Elias pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. He should burn the damn thing. Toss it into the Cumberland River. Pretend he never set foot in Finch's pawn shop. But something in him rebelled. He'd been ignored for too long. Too many nights playing to crowds more interested in their drinks than his songs. Too many mornings waking to the silence of a phone that never rang with an offer, an opportunity, a chance. The book promised otherwise. And Elias had never been good at resisting promises. By noon he had his guitar on his lap, the book propped against the couch cushion. He stared at the page, heart hammering. The opening chord looked almost normal. Almost. He pressed his fingers into the familiar shape, let the pick fall. The sound that came out was not his own. It was his guitar, yes, the battered Martin with its wood worn smooth by years of neglect. But the chord rang out too rich, too vast, like a cathedral organ condensed into 6 strings. The sound filled the apartment, pressed into the walls, sank into the floorboards. Elias blinked, his breath catching. The chord still hung in the air, reverberating far longer than it should. And beneath it, a whisper. Not words, exactly. More like the sound of his name exhaled by a mouth just inches from his ear. Elias? He flinched, the guitar nearly slipping from his lap. But no one was there. The silence that followed was worse. That night, he tried again. The second measure bent his fingers into shapes that hurt, positions no song had ever demanded. But when he struck them, the air itself seemed to warp. His window pane rattled. The lamp flickered. Downstairs, someone banged on the ceiling with a broom handle, shouting for him to shut the hell up. But Elias couldn't. The song carried him. His hands moved as if guided. Each note dug deeper into him, scraping marrow from his bones. His fingertips bled where the strings bit too hard, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. When the final chord came, it rang like the tolling of a bell. And then, silence. A silence that wasn't empty. The kind that listened back. The next morning, his neighbor from 3B cornered him in the hallway. A thin woman with tired eyes, she looked jittery, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "You played last night," she said. Elias opened his mouth to apologize, but she shook her head. "No. Don't apologize. Don't you dare." Her pupils were wide, dilated. "It was beautiful. I couldn't move while you played. I just stood there, listening. Hours felt like minutes." She broke off, blinking hard. "When will you play again?" Elias stared. The woman had never spoken to him before. Now she looked at him as if he'd given her something she couldn't live without. He mumbled something about maybe soon and fled into his apartment. The book sat on the table where he'd left it. And now he swore it was thicker. Heavier. Like it had eaten something. That night, Elias dreamed again. The grand hall returned, filled with shadowy faces. They clapped in perfect rhythm, the sound like bones rattling. But this time, one figure in the front row leaned forward. Pale, sharp-featured, eyes like pits of smoke. He smiled with too many teeth. And he whispered the same word Elias had heard while playing. Encore. Elias woke screaming, his guitar in his lap though he hadn't fallen asleep with it. The strings thrummed on their own. The song wasn't finished. For 2 days Elias didn't touch the book. He told himself he was done. He shoved it into the drawer beneath his coffee table, threw a stack of old bills and take-out menus over it, and drank until the whispering in his head dulled. But silence had changed for him. He'd lived with it for years, silence in empty bars, silence in his phone, silence in the blank faces of people walking past when he played on the street corner. He used to think silence was just the absence of sound. Now he knew better. Silence was hunger. It pressed at the edges of his ears, leaned close in the dark, waiting for him to play again. By the third night, he broke. The notes cut into him like hooks. His fingers blistered and split, but he couldn't stop. The music wasn't a song anymore, it was a command. The book's pages drank up his blood as though they had been waiting for it. And outside his window, people gathered. He didn't notice them at first. His apartment was on the second floor, the blinds drawn, his little corner of the city usually forgotten. But when the final chord of the new passage rolled through the room, shaking the walls, he heard it, applause. Actual applause. He stumbled to the window and froze. There were 6 of them, standing in the drizzle on the sidewalk below. Not talking. Not smiling. Just staring up at his window with their hands pressed together, clapping slowly in unison. None of them were neighbors he recognized. One man's face was pale and slack, as though he hadn't slept in weeks. A woman's hair clung wet to her face, her eyes unfocused, lips moving silently like she was mouthing his notes back to him. Another was a child, no older than 10, her nightgown plastered to her skin by the rain. Elias jerked the blinds shut. His heart hammered, but the sound of clapping went on, steady, relentless, until dawn. He tried to ignore it. But wherever he went in the days that followed, there were eyes. At the corner store, a man in a suit followed him down every aisle, never buying anything, never speaking. When Elias glanced at him, the man's lips were moving, shaping the same silent, unholy rhythm. On the bus, 2 teenagers sat directly across from him, their earbuds dangling unused, their gazes fixed on him. One tapped his fingers on his knee, perfectly in time with the measure Elias had played 2 nights ago. At night, the crowd below his window grew. 10. 15. More. They came with raincoats, with blankets, with folding chairs. They didn't speak. They didn't leave. They only waited for him to play again. Elias stopped sleeping. He stopped eating, too, except in distracted mouthfuls. His skin grew pale, his eyes red-rimmed. But every time he swore he'd stop, the silence pressed in tighter, curling around his ribs, whispering through the cracks in his apartment. "Play me, and they will hear you." So he did. The audience answered. When he struck the first chord, the people below began swaying as one. The child in the nightgown twirled in slow, dreamlike circles. The woman with wet hair lifted her face to the sky as though drinking the sound. The music throbbed with something alive. It wasn't just sound anymore, it was heat, a pulse, a pressure that moved through his veins as much as the strings. The book's pages flipped on their own, dragging him forward, feeding him more. By the end of the set, Elias collapsed, drenched in sweat, his hands raw. The crowd below erupted into frantic applause. But when he dared peek through the blinds, the pale, sharp-featured man from his dreams was among them, standing perfectly still while the others clapped. And this time, Elias was sure he was smiling. Later, as Elias sat slumped on the couch, trying to steady his breath, his phone buzzed for the first time in weeks. A text from an unknown number. "I heard your song. We all did. Let's talk about your future." The name below it froze his blood. Marla Finch. Elias didn't answer the text at first. He set the phone face down on the table, staring at the glowing screen as though it might burn him if he touched it. Marla Finch. He hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since the night she'd tossed him out of her pawnshop with that crooked little grin, muttering, "You don't have the hands for it, heart." Not yet. But somehow she knew. She had heard the song. And if Marla Finch knew, that meant others knew too. The crowd outside his window was proof. By the time the second text came, Elias's resolve was paper-thin. Midnight. Back room of the pawnshop. Bring the book. Or don't, but either way, it won't stop. He stared at the words, his throat dry. Midnight. That gave him just 6 hours to decide if he'd finally face her, or let the song devour him in solitude. The silence answered for him. By dusk, the crowd had doubled. 30 people now, faces tilted up at his window, some carrying lanterns, some clutching worn instruments as if they wanted to join him. They swayed without sound, their shadows stretching long under the streetlights. Elias couldn't breathe in his own apartment anymore. He stuffed the book into his guitar case and slipped out the back door, the audience's heads turning in eerie unison as if they sensed his absence. The pawn shop hadn't changed. Marla Finch's place always felt like a mausoleum for other people's dreams. The cracked neon sign still buzzed above the door, its red glow bleeding into the damp Nashville night. Inside, guitars with broken strings leaned against rusted amplifiers. Trumpets with dented bells lay beside cracked porcelain dolls. Every shelf held a promise that had been pawned and never reclaimed. The bell above the door gave a single, hollow chime as Elias stepped inside. And there she was. Marla Finch, leaning against the counter, a cigarette smoldering between two chipped fingers, her sharp eyes glinting through the haze. Time hadn't touched her the way it touched other people. Her hair was streaked silver now, but her smile was the same, a fox's grin, sly and patient. "Well," she drawled, exhaling smoke. "Looks like you finally found it." Elias swallowed hard. "You knew about the book?" Marla tilted her head. "Knew? Boy, I've been waiting for you to open it. Been waiting a long damn time." She pushed off the counter and crossed the floor, her boots echoing on the warped wooden planks. Her presence filled the room, thick as smoke. "You think you're the first one it sang to?" she asked. Elias clutched the guitar case tighter. "What the hell is it?" Her smile widened. "It's the chord, heart. The chord that don't just play music. It plays memory. It plays blood. Folks have been bending their fingers round those notes since before Nashville was even a stain on the map. Every generation, someone opens the book. And every time, it asks the same question." Elias's voice was a whisper. "What question?" Marla leaned close enough that he smelled the smoke on her breath. "Who's willing to pay the price for greatness?" The silence in the shop seemed to lean in with her words. Elias felt his hands tremble on the case. "And what happens if I stop? If I don't play it anymore?" Marla's laugh was soft and cruel. "Oh, sugar, it ain't about stopping. It's about finishing. You opened the door when you struck that first note. The audience? They're not here for a half song. They want the whole thing." As if on cue, a faint hum rose outside the pawnshop walls. Elias froze, realizing the crowd had followed him. Their voices vibrated through the night air, not words but a low drone, like a congregation waiting for the sermon. Marla's smile sharpened. "See? They already chose you." Elias shook his head. "I didn't ask for this." "No one ever does," Marla said, flicking ash onto the floor. "But you," she jabbed a finger at him. "You got a choice right now. You can run yourself ragged until the silence eats you alive, or you can lean in and take the gift. Let it tear you apart proper. Let it make you." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You play it to the end, heart, and they'll never forget your name." Elias's throat closed around her words. Greatness. Legacy. The thing he'd chased and failed to grasp his whole life, dangling in front of him like bait on a hook. But behind her eyes was something darker. She wasn't offering him salvation, she was offering him a contract. A pact. The silence swelled inside him, urging him toward it. His fingers twitched like they were already reaching for the strings. And somewhere in that hum outside the pawnshop, he swore he heard a voice cut through, clear as a bell. Leo Hart. The hum outside the pawnshop grew heavier, like thunder before a storm. Elias stood frozen, every nerve in his body tuned to the drone that carried his name. Leo Hart. The syllables stretched like strings being pulled too tight. He pressed the guitar case against his leg, as if clutching it tighter might make the sound stop. Marla Finch only watched him, smoke curling around her face like a veil. "You hear it now, don't you?" she asked softly. Elias nodded, his throat too dry for words. "They're calling you," Marla said. "Always hungry, always waiting. You gave them a taste. Now they want a feast." She crossed to a shelf, where a battered metronome sat among cracked records and broken harmonicas. The brass pendulum clicked as she flicked it into motion. Tick, tock. Tick, tock. The sound filled the room, steady as a heartbeat. "The chord don't live in paper," Marla murmured. "Or wood. Or wire. It lives in flesh. That's why it sounds different every time. It borrows from whoever plays it, pulls their marrow through the strings, feeds it to the silence." Elias felt the air shift colder, the weight of her words pressing into his chest. "And every song," she went on, "begins with an offering." "What kind of offering?" Elias forced the words past his lips, though dread already coiled in his gut. Marla smiled like a patient teacher. "Blood, heart. The oldest currency there is." His stomach twisted. "No." "Yes," she countered, her voice hardening. "Think about it, what song worth remembering was ever born without sacrifice? You think Johnny Ray vanished 'cause he couldn't handle a few late nights? No. He paid his way in. He played it clean through. And when it was done, she tapped her temple. The silence swallowed him whole. But the name? The legend? That's forever." Elias shook his head. "I don't want this." Marla leaned closer, her eyes sharp. "You already have it." The words landed heavy as a coffin lid. The crowd outside rose in pitch, the hum shifting into something jagged, urgent. Elias staggered back, the guitar case knocking against his knee. He felt the pull, like invisible fingers tugging at his veins. "They won't wait long," Marla warned. "If you don't feed it, it'll take what it wants." Elias's voice broke. "And if I do?" Marla's grin widened. "Then, darling, you'll own the stage. Every stage. For as long as you can stand it." A sudden slam rattled the pawnshop door. Elias spun, heart hammering, as a shadow pressed against the frosted glass. The shape of a man, or something wearing a man's form, stood there, unmoving. The hum outside dipped low, almost reverent. Marla's tone was casual, but her eyes glittered. "Looks like the first volunteer." Elias's blood went cold. "Volunteer?" Marla shrugged. "Some come willingly. Some don't. Either way, the chord gets fed." The figure's hand pressed against the glass. A streak of red smeared across it, dark and wet. Elias's stomach dropped. "He's bleeding." Marla's grin didn't falter. "Then he's ready." The door shuddered once more before easing open, slow as a confession. The bell above the frame gave a single hollow ring, and the man stepped inside. He was gaunt, his skin grey with exhaustion, eyes unfocused. His shirt clung dark with blood seeping from his palm. But his expression was peaceful, almost eager. For the song, he whispered, voice cracking. The hum outside swelled in approval. Elias staggered back against the counter. No. I can't. Marla grabbed his wrist, her nails biting into his skin. Her smile was all teeth. Yes, you can. And you will. She thrust the guitar case toward him. Open it. Elias's fingers trembled on the latches. His mind screamed to run, but the silence inside him had its claws deep now. It wanted. The man knelt in the center of the shop, bowing his head like a penitent before the altar. His blood dripped onto the warped wood, pooling dark and slow. Marla's voice was a whisper in Elias's ear. Play, heart. Play, and claim what's yours. His hands shook as he lifted the guitar free. The wood felt warm, too warm, as if it had been waiting for him. The strings quivered though he hadn't touched them. The metronome ticked. Tick. Tark. Tick. Tark. The man raised his bleeding hand higher, and with a shudder, Elias struck the chord. The sound ripped through the pawnshop like a scream trapped in steel. The man convulsed, his body arching as if strings ran through his veins. His blood pulsed brighter, glowing as it seeped into the floorboards. The hum outside split into 1,000 voices chanting in unison. Leo Hart. Leo Hart. Leo Hart. Elias wanted to stop, wanted to rip his hands from the guitar, but the strings dug into his skin like teeth. The silence inside him swelled, drinking deep. And when the last note faded, the man was still. Empty. A husk with eyes wide open, staring at nothing. The silence broke into a roar of applause that only Elias could hear, echoing inside his skull. It was intoxicating, sickening, endless. Marla clapped once, slow and sharp. Well done, Hart. Elias dropped the guitar, his chest heaving. His hands were slick with sweat, or blood, he couldn't tell. He stared at the body on the floor. His voice cracked. What did I just do? Marla's smile was cold and proud. You just opened the show. The body lay on the pawnshop floor, slack and grey, as if the blood had been wrung out by invisible hands. Elias couldn't tear his eyes away. The hum outside faded into something worse, a silence that listened. It pressed at the windows, at the walls, filling the space like an audience holding its breath. The guitar strings still quivered. Not from his touch. From something inside. Marla crouched over the corpse, unbothered. She touched the man's face with a tenderness that felt obscene, then closed his eyes. First note always tastes the sweetest, she said, rising. And now? The chord's part of you. Elias's chest burned. He stumbled back against the counter, his pulse racing. I didn't ask for this. Marla lit another cigarette, her voice flat. No one ever does. But music don't care if you ask, it only cares if you play. She pointed to his hands. Elias followed her gaze. His fingertips were raw, the strings having bitten deep. But beneath the torn skin, something shimmered faintly, like veins of silver crawling under his flesh. What the hell is this? He whispered. Marla exhaled smoke. Growth. The song's roots. It's carving its way through you, heart. Every time you play, it'll take more. A sharp ache pulsed in his chest. He clutched at it, feeling as though something moved just under his ribs, crawling like an insect. Then, faintly, he heard it. His heartbeat wasn't steady anymore. It ticked like the pawnshop metronome. Tick. Tack. Tick. Tack. He stumbled forward, dizzy. It's inside me. Marla smiled faintly. Good. That means you'll last longer than most. The body on the floor twitched. Elias froze. It was subtle at first, a finger curling, then a jaw tightening. The man's lips parted, and from the hollow of his throat came a low groan. But it wasn't his voice anymore. It was a dozen voices. A choir. Leo Hart. Elias backed away, clutching the guitar as if it were both weapon and curse. Why is he? Marla cut him off. He's not. What's left of him is just an echo. The silence wears the dead like old clothes. Don't let it frighten you. The corpse sat up, its eyes vacant but glowing faintly blue. It turned its head toward Elias. The choir inside its throat spoke again. Play for us, play until the world forgets its own name. The guitar vibrated, strings rattling with hunger. Elias felt it like teeth sinking into him. He dropped the instrument. It hit the floor with a hollow clang. But the vibration didn't stop. The sound continued, resonating through the shop as if the guitar had grown lungs. The strings curled upward, twisting like wires alive, reaching toward Elias. Marla didn't flinch. It wants more, heart. And it'll get it. Better to choose what it eats than let it choose for you. Elias's hands shook violently. His voice cracked. And if I don't? Marla's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Then, darling, it'll start with you. Elias staggered toward the door, but the corpse blocked his path, rising to its feet in a jerky, puppet-like sway. The choir's voice dripped from its mouth. You can't run. The song already has your blood. You belong on the stage. The metronome on the shelf ticked faster, out of sync with itself, until the clicks became a single metallic hiss. Elias pressed against the counter, trapped between Marla's calm smile, the living corpse, and the guitar that pulsed like a heart on the floor. For the first time, he realized. He hadn't opened a performance. He'd opened a cage. And something was stepping out. The shop smelled of rust, smoke, and something Elias couldn't name, a sweetness that clung to the back of his throat, rotten but almost melodic, like syrup gone sour. The corpse stood rigid in front of the door, its chest rising and falling though no breath moved inside. Its glowing eyes fixed on him, cold as the lights above Broadway at 3 a.m. after the crowd stumble home. The choir of voices inside it stretched and strained, as though the thing had swallowed a cathedral full of dying hymns. Play, play until the dust remembers. Elias's stomach churned. He wanted to scream, but his throat was thick with silence, strangled by it. His hand twitched toward the guitar on the floor, even though every part of him knew touching it again would be like drinking poison just because he was thirsty. Behind him, Marla didn't move. She simply leaned against the counter, cigarette smoke curling upward in lazy ribbons. Her eyes gleamed through the haze. You see? She said softly, almost like a proud teacher. You've woken it up. Most folks just strum and vanish. But you, oh, Elias, you've given it teeth. The corpse shuddered. Dust poured from its mouth with each syllable, fine grey powder spilling down its shirt and onto the floorboards. Elias realized it wasn't just saying words, its body was breaking down with every note it tried to carry. Play? Heart. The voices faltered, deeper now, like mountains grinding against one another. Then came the sound that froze Elias to the marrow. Dozens of other voices whispered from outside the pawnshop. At first faint, like wind curling through the Nashville streets. Then louder. Closer. Play for us. The windows fogged. Not with condensation, but with faces. Smudged impressions pressing against the glass, mouths moving in silent prayer, eyes hollow as if pressed from the inside. Elias staggered back. What the hell is this? Marla exhaled another drag, her calm never faltering. The choir of dust. The silence never sings alone, darling. Once it gets a taste, the forgotten will come sniffing. And when they gather. Her smile curved upward. They'll follow you everywhere. The corpse lurched toward Elias. The sound of its footsteps was wrong, dry, as though the floorboards cracked not under weight, but under absence. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide. From within, Elias heard guitar notes bending, twisting, sharp enough to slice nerves. He scrambled, kicking the guitar aside. It slid across the shop and stopped under a shelf of old radios. But the strings still vibrated, plucking themselves in jagged bursts. The sound drilled into his skull. His pulse kept time. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. The metronome of death. Outside, the fog pressed harder. The smudged faces became more distinct, men in Stetson hats, women in beehive hairdos, children with hollow eyes. Whole crowds of the forgotten pressed against the glass. Elias recognized them. Not personally, but as Nashville's ghosts. Every musician who vanished without a record deal. Every busker who drank themselves to death on the sidewalks. Every voice that once sang on Broadway and was swallowed by the noise of the city. Their mouths opened together, whispering his name. Leo Hart. Elias clutched his ears, shaking his head. No, I'm not playing for you. I didn't want this. The corpse staggered closer, its jaw hanging like broken hinges. The choir howled from within. The guitar on the floor shrieked, a bent, wrong chord that wasn't meant for mortal hands. The strings snapped upward, curling like serpents, as if trying to latch onto Elias's legs. He stumbled toward the counter. Marla, help me. Tell me how to stop it. Marla finally crushed her cigarette out against the wood, leaving a black mark. Her voice was flat, merciless. You don't stop it. You carry it. Until it carries you. The lights flickered. Every radio on the shelf sputtered to life. Some whispered in static, others played warped country tunes slowed to half speed. The overlapping sounds melted together into a maddening wall of noise. And beneath it all, the chord hummed. It was the root. The infection. Elias realized then it wasn't the ghosts outside begging him. It was the chord itself, speaking through them. The silence had found its mouthpiece. Him. The corpse finally reached him, its hand snapping out with unnatural speed. Its touch was dry, as though dipped in ash. Elias shoved it back with all his strength, and for a moment it fell, crumbling like paper. But then the dust swirled and rose, pulling its form back together. Elias screamed, running for the door. The glass shattered outward before he could reach it. The forgotten poured inside. Not as flesh, not even as whole spirits, but as fragments, dusty outlines, slurred mouths, voices overlapping until Elias thought his brain would split. Hands that weren't hands clawed at him, begging, shoving, pulling him toward the guitar. He stumbled, fell to his knees. The instrument's strings snapped back into place, taut and gleaming like veins of silver. The crowd's chant hit a fever pitch. Play! 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 And in that storm of dust and voices, Elias understood the truth. The silence wasn't just inside the guitar. It was inside him. The dust swallowed him whole. 1 second Elias was on the pawnshop floor, his hands clawing at air, lungs choking on grey clouds. The next, the world cracked open like an old vinyl warped by heat. He landed hard on wood, splintered, stage-worn planks beneath his palms. The floor smelled of sweat, liquor, and mildew, as if decades of performances had seeped into it. When Elias looked up, he saw lights. Stage lights. Not the bright, buzzing LEDs of Broadway bars, but the sickly yellow glow of ancient spotlights, dangling from rafters like the eyes of dead gods. The pawnshop was gone. The streets were gone. Nashville was gone. He was standing on a stage that shouldn't exist, vast and endless, suspended in darkness. And the crowd. The crowd went on forever. Row upon row of hollow faces, spectral bodies packed shoulder to shoulder, fading into mist at the edges. Thousands, no, tens of thousands, of the forgotten dead. Musicians who never made it, buskers who starved, singers who drank poison hope until it rotted them. Their eyes glowed faintly, all locked on him. In their hands were instruments broken, missing strings, warped by fire or rain. And yet, every one of them held those instruments like sacred relics. The air pulsed with anticipation. The silence had built its theater. The guitar lay at Elias's feet. Whole again. Strings shining with unnatural light, the body polished like glass though he knew he'd seen it rotting minutes before. It hummed, vibrating without touch. He whispered to himself, "Don't pick it up. Don't." But his hands betrayed him. They trembled, lifted, and grasped the neck before his brain could stop them. His body obeyed the silence now, not his will. The moment his fingers brushed the strings, the crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a roar of hunger. The forgotten stamped their feet, shook their broken instruments, shrieked his name. Heart! 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 Elias's pulse matched the rhythm. His veins thrummed with it. And then the first chord played itself. A jagged, wrong sound that split the air like lightning. The crowd froze. Every glowing eye fixed on him. Then, in perfect unison, they answered. Thousands of broken instruments bled one note, warping together into a dirge so powerful Elias felt his bones vibrate. The stage shook. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was a choir of decay, and Elias was its conductor. Across town, Mia Thompson sat hunched over her desk, the glow of her laptop painting her face in pale light. Coffee cups littered the table, and the air was stale from too many cigarettes she swore she'd quit. She had spent days combing through old archives, piecing together the web of disappearances tied to the cord. At first, it seemed like rumor, like Nashville ghost stories. But patterns had emerged, terrifyingly consistent. Every decade, waves of musicians vanished. No bodies found. Only whispers that they'd played too deep. And it always circled back to one name. Johnny Ray. Mia leaned closer to her screen. The newspaper clipping was grainy, but Johnny's grin was sharp, full of cocky charm. The headline read, "Johnny Ray, music's brightest star missing without a trace." Her research note sprawled across the desk, scribbled in frantic handwriting. 1959, Ray disappears. Last sighting on stage, Ryman Auditorium. 1970s and 1990s, dozens vanish mid-performance. Instruments left behind, strings snapped. 2008, a bar in East Nashville collapses after reports of sound shaking the walls. No survivors. 2024, Leo Hart sighted playing the chord. Not seen since. MIA rubbed her temples. Leo, what did you get into? The sound of static cut through her apartment. She froze. Her laptop speakers hissed, though no music file was open. Slowly, the static bent into something recognizable, a guitar chord, raw and jagged. Her blood ran cold. The cursed sound wasn't trapped in bars and pawnshops anymore. It had gone digital. MIA grabbed her recorder, her journalist instinct overriding her fear. She pressed record, whispering. Day 47. The chord is evolving. It can travel. Through speakers, through recordings. If this gets out, it won't just be Nashville's problem. It'll be the world's. The chord surged again, louder. Her coffee mug rattled against the desk. The lights flickered. And for just a second, she swore she saw a figure in the corner of her apartment. A man in a torn suit, clutching a guitar that bled dust. Watching her. On the Dead Man stage, Elias's body burned. Sweat rolled down his face though the air was freezing. His fingers bled against the strings, but the guitar fed on it, the notes sharper with every drop. The audience howled, shaking the void. The Forgotten stomped until the wood cracked. Stop, Elias gasped. His voice was hoarse, breaking. I don't want this. But the silence didn't care what he wanted. It only cared that he played. The chord twisted, mutating into something older, darker. Elias glimpsed shadows crawling at the edges of the stage, things too large to be human, too ancient to belong to Nashville. Their shapes rippled like smoke but carried the weight of stone. The guitar's sound had reached beyond the forgotten dead. It had woken something else. Something older than music itself. The crowd's roar collapsed into a whisper. Thousands of voices in unison, hushed, reverent. Johnny. Johnny Ray. Elias blinked through tears. His vision blurred, but he saw it. A figure emerging from the blackness, stepping onto the stage. A tall man in a sharp suit, hair slicked back, grin as bright as it was in the newspaper clipping MIA had found. His guitar gleamed like liquid silver. Johnny Ray. Alive. Or something close enough. Hell of a set you're playing, boy, Johnny drawled, his voice honey-smooth and hollow all at once. But you're running it ragged. Let me show you how it's done. The crowd roared. Elias staggered back, clutching his cursed guitar. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might split. Because now, he wasn't just fighting the silence. He was opening for Johnny Ray. The silence demanded blood. Elias stood frozen, his guitar heavy as stone in his hands, staring at Johnny Ray. The man looked untouched by time, sharp suit, silver tie, slick grin, but his eyes betrayed him. They weren't eyes anymore. They were mirrors, reflecting nothing but void. Johnny strummed a single chord. The sound cracked through the void like a whip, splitting the air. The crowd of the forgotten howled, shaking their broken instruments in worship. Some collapsed outright, vanishing into smoke as if the sound had unmade them. Elias's gut twisted. Every instinct told him to run. But there was nowhere to run, only the stage, the lights, and the endless sea of dead. Johnny tilted his head, grinning. "Come on, boy," he drawled. "You picked it up. You called me. Now you play." Elias's fingers trembled over the strings. His throat burned. "I don't want this." Johnny's smile widened. "Doesn't matter what you want. The chord chooses. The crowd craves. The stage feeds." The forgotten began to chant again. "Play. Play. Play." Elias shut his eyes, lifted his hand, and struck. The guitar screamed, a sound jagged and alien, but alive. The stage shook beneath him, wood splintering as if rejecting the noise. But the crowd devoured it, moaning with hunger. Johnny Ray laughed. "Not bad. Not bad at all. But let me show you what mastery sounds like." He played 3 notes. Just 3. And the world bent. The lights above shattered, raining sparks that froze midair. The stage-boards rippled like water. The void stretched wider, and Elias felt the weight of something vast pressing in, something older than music, older than sound. The crowd dropped to their knees in unison. Elias's heart raced. The silence wasn't just feeding, it was evolving. Johnny leaned closer, his silver guitar glowing with light that wasn't light at all. "You ain't playing against me, boy. You're playing against eternity. You ready?" Elias's body betrayed him again. His hands moved faster than his thoughts, riffing, bending notes into shrieks of fury. The guitar bled heat, his skin blistering where it touched. But still he played. The duet had begun. Across town, Mia Thompson sat frozen as her laptop speaker screamed with distorted guitar. It wasn't coming from a file. She had nothing open. The sound was forcing itself through. The walls of her apartment shook. Her vision blurred. For a terrifying second, she thought her heartbeat had synced with the rhythm. She scrambled, yanking her recorder close, voice shaking. Day 48. The chord is no longer confined. It transmits through devices without files, without input. It infects. Anyone who hears it is vulnerable. This could spread globally. A loud crash made her flinch. Her kitchen light bulb burst, glass scattering. The chord wailed higher, almost like laughter. Mia's phone buzzed violently on the desk. She grabbed it. Notifications flooded the screen, clips from TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. Titles like, "WTF is this guitar riff?" "Haunted Nashville chord." "Listen if you dare challenge." Each one carried distorted recordings. Comments spiraled in horror. "I can't stop listening. It hurts, but I need more. My brother's gone. Just gone." Mia's stomach dropped. It was already spreading. To Elias. The Dead Man stage had become an inferno of sound. Johnny Ray tore through riffs like lightning, every note sharp enough to cut flesh. Elias fought back with wild, desperate fury, sweat and blood dripping onto the frets. The forgotten screamed for more. The void pulsed with their hunger. Every note Elias played felt like it burned a piece of his soul, ripped out and fed to the silence. But every time Johnny struck his silver strings, Elias felt himself erasing. Johnny leaned in midriff, his voice a hiss beneath the roar. You ain't fighting me, boy. You're auditioning. And the stage don't take no failures. Elias gasped, his body trembling. His vision blurred, but then he saw them. Shapes moving in the crowd. Not just the forgotten. The living. Faces flickered among the dead, confused, screaming, clutching at their ears. He recognized them. Kids, bartenders, street players. People he'd passed on Nashville's streets. People dragged here because they'd listened. The cord wasn't bound to the void anymore. It was swallowing the living. Elias's rage snapped. He screamed and struck the guitar with all his might. The note that exploded wasn't music. It was a tear in the air. The crowd wailed. The void cracked. Johnny's grin faltered. Well now, he drawled, though his eyes flared with anger, maybe you got a bit more fire in YA than I thought. The lights flickered. The void groaned. The duet wasn't over. But Elias had just changed the rules. The world broke on a single note. Elias's desperate strike ripped a hole in the void. The stage splintered, a jagged tear opening in the air like glass shattering in reverse. Through it, he saw a kaleidoscope of worlds, neon Nashville streets, dim apartments, glowing screens. The living and the dead bled into one another, tangled in static and sound. Johnny Ray staggered back, silver guitar still screaming. For the first time, his grin faltered. His mirrored eyes reflected fire, chaos, and something else, fear. You weren't supposed to find that note, Johnny growled, voice bending like warped vinyl. That ain't yours to play. Elias gritted his teeth, bleeding fingers gripping his guitar. Then maybe it's mine now. The forgotten howled as the void shook. Some clawed toward the tear, dissolving as they touched its edges. Others turned on Elias, their faces warped with rage and hunger. The duel had become a war. In her apartment, Mia Thompson clutched her recorder, screaming into it over the deafening roar. The tear is open. The cord is no longer contained. It's transmitting between worlds. Anyone listening, they are not safe. Oh God. Her laptop screen flickered. Johnny Ray's face grinned back at her from a dozen windows, his mirrored eyes staring straight through. Mia, the voice crawled from the speakers. Reporter girl. Archivist of shadows. You been watching, writing, listening. You want the truth. Step through. Join the encore. Her walls cracked with vibration. Her ears bled. For a terrifying second, she almost said yes. But then she remembered Elias, sweating under the stage lights, always broke, always stubborn, always chasing something more. She remembered the way he'd looked at the guitar the night he bought it, like it was salvation, not a curse. No, she whispered, gripping the recorder tight. I'm not your encore. I'm your witness. She hurled the recorder into the laptop screen. Sparks erupted. The image shattered. The scream of the cord cut off, just for her. But she knew Elias was still inside. The tear widened, swallowing the stage. Elias played furiously, hands blistered and bleeding, every note forcing the wound open further. Johnny Ray struck back, silver cords lashing like whips, trying to stitch the tear closed. The air warped between them. This wasn't just music anymore, it was creation against erasure. Johnny snarled, his face breaking, cracks crawling through his skin like porcelain. You think you can end it, boy? I am the cord. I've been playing since before you were born, since before your daddy ever strummed a string. You ain't strong enough to stop me." Elias's vision blurred. His body screamed. But he thought of MIA, of the faces in the crowd, of the living souls dragged here because they'd listened. And then he realized something. The tear didn't want Johnny Ray. The silence didn't crave his mastery. It craved Elias's imperfection. His raw, broken, human sound. He closed his eyes. Stopped trying to match Johnny's perfection. And played wrong. Notes bent off key, strings snapped under his fingers, rhythm stumbled. The guitar shrieked, ugly and jagged. But it was alive. The tears screamed open. The forgotten wailed as they were ripped apart, consumed by the very silence they worshipped. The stage disintegrated beneath them. Johnny Ray roared, his body unraveling into static and ash. "No. The stage is mine. I am the encore." But the void swallowed him whole. And Elias fell. Aftermath. MIA found him on Lower Broadway, collapsed in the street, guitar shattered beside him. His eyes fluttered open. He looked hollow, drained, but alive. "Did it work?" he rasped. MIA glanced at the darkened sky. The noise was gone. No more screaming from her devices. No more cursed riffs on the wind. Only silence. She knelt beside him. For now. They sat there together, in the glow of neon lights, while sirens wailed in the distance. But Mia's recorder, battered, cracked, nearly destroyed, still worked. Its red light blinked softly. She didn't remember turning it on. Inside, faintly, impossibly, a single distorted note played. Weeks later, MIA posted her final article. The chord that knows your name was not a song, not a myth, not even a curse. It was hunger. It fed on ambition, on obsession, on the need to be remembered. Elias' heart silenced it, for now, but history has shown us, silence never lasts. Someone, somewhere, will strum the wrong strings. And when they do, we may not get another encore. She closed her laptop. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe. Then her phone buzzed. A new video. A kid in Memphis. Playing guitar. The caption read, "Anyone else hear this weird riff? Can't stop playing it." Mia's blood ran cold. The silence had only been waiting.
Leave now, but beware. The mansion remembers those who enter, and it will call you back. You've walked the halls, heard the voices, and felt the chill. The story ends for now, but don't forget to like and subscribe because the mansion waits. Always.